students, I greet you from wherever you are. My name's Madam Phoebe Karaoke, a lecturer in Mount Kenya University in the School of Hospitality, Travel and Tourism. Today I'll take you through airfares and ticketing. That's the unit, and it's the unit called BHT2109. And the specific topic of today will be just an introduction of airfares and ticketing, just to have a background understanding of what exactly is airfares and ticketing and what it entails. So welcome to today's lesson, and I hope that we are going to learn together. So just as I said, today's topic is on the introduction to airfares and ticketing. And as we all know, we all want maybe to travel to a certain maybe destination within a country or maybe outside a country. And before then, you should be aware of some issues that you are supposed to know as a traveler or as a passenger. If you are traveling by air, then you must know what is supposed, or what you're supposed to know at the beginning before you start or embark on that journey. So during air travel, there are several requirements that a traveler or a passenger should be aware of. And these requirements relate to issues of departure, issues of the transit areas, and the issues of the arrival and the related weight requirement. If you get to know about all these kinds of requirements before you embark on your journey or before you start a journey, be it a domestic flight, be it an international flight, then you should be aware of this, because they are going to help you a lot, because at the end of it, we find that they normally change a person's airfare. These requirements may affect the fine of airfare that the customer is required to pay for, and that's why it's important at the beginning, first of all, to know of these specific requirements. We have the departing formality. That's also that's the very first requirement that as a passenger or as a traveler, you should be aware of. So at the departing formality, it's a requirement that you should know that normally at the departing formality, there's that issue of the very first thing, knowing about what you are required to have at the departing formality as a requirement. So transfer, there's normally the transfer of baggage from background transportation to check-in desks via the security check, normally at the Terminal A. And also still at that departing formality, you're also supposed to hand in those important requirements, travel documents that you're supposed to have. Like, for example, a ticket and the passport with a visa. So your passport must be there, you must hand it over, and also it has to have what you call a visa, because a passport is just a document that is showing the authorization of an individual from the issuing authority to travel. And a visa is just an endorsement onto a passport. So once you hand in those kinds of documents, then you'll be allowed to go to the other kind of a protocol or maybe procedure for you to continue with your travel, or maybe procedures for you to go to the next level for you to travel. We have the transit area formality. Transit area formality normally those areas whereby you don't say you've arrived yet to your final destination. So at the transit area formality, it's on normally where passengers are normally arriving in another airport, but have not yet reached to their final destination and must transfer to a connecting flight. These passengers normally wait in a specially designated area of the airport that is called the transit area or a transit lodge. However, when a connecting flight does not depart for several hours, then the passenger may be lodged at an airport hotel, courtesy of that specific airline he or she had traveled with. Passengers in a transit area still do not generally go through customs and immigration formalities. And baggage is normally sent through to the final destination. So learner, you should understand that normally at those specific requirement of transit area, you should understand what are the necessities for you to be in that area as you're continuing with your journey. And so to go on, because we've seen that in that area, which is the transit area, normally you've not yet reached yet your final destination where you are to go to, and maybe you'll be connected either to another flight, or maybe you have a sleep over there, and then the next day you continue your journey. But still remember, it's a transit area. You've not yet reached your final destination. I'll now take you to the several types of connections that normally exist. And normally we have connections that exist whenever maybe you are in a transit area or maybe in a transfer area. And these are one, international connection. An international connection is where we have that connection which is normally between two international flights. And in the international to domestic connection, this is normally a connection between an arriving international flight and a departing domestic flight. So this is a connection that is involving two kinds of flights, an arriving international and a departing domestic flight. Then you go to the domestic to international connection. This is normally a connection between an arriving domestic flight and a departing international flight. So if you understand of these specific issues that normally encompass on the issues of connections and transfers, then you'll be well placed whenever you're in those areas, and you will not be very much confused, not knowing which maybe flight you're to connect with. If you're to connect to a domestic, international to domestic, then you must know which is that an arriving international flight and which is that domestic departing flight that is actually to maybe you'll be involved with. So it's good that if you understand these kinds of international and the domestic connections, and you know which is arriving and which is departing, then you'll be well placed and not confused while at those international airports. Then we have domestic to international connection. This is normally a connection between an arriving domestic flight and a departing international flight. Then the last one, we have the domestic connection, which is a simple one, which we say it's normally a connection between two flights in the same or within the same country. Then we go to the other formality, which is a requirement, as I said. It's normally arrival formality, and in the arrival formality now, it's whereby you'll be required as a passenger to know once you're in your final destination, you've arrived at your final destination, then what is it that you're required to do? Once passengers arrive at their final destination, they go through the following. And one of it is that you go to the very first office, or maybe the very first place where you're going to be checked whether you met the criteria and you are supposed maybe or given the authority to be in that specific destination you've arrived into. So you go to the immigration and the passport control. Immigration and the passport control, that is under the arrival formality as a requirement. Immigration and passport control, this is whereby all arriving passengers are checked, arriving passengers are checked to determine whether they were authorized to enter the country they are in or they have arrived. Passengers are also subject still, once they have arrived, to health inspection. And that's why it's very important to know which country are you going to, so that you know what they require, whether it's a health certificate, and so that once you're there, you'll be able to hand over or maybe to surrender the said certificate, the health certificate. So at that place, still at the migrations, once you're in the final destination, you'll be checked. You'll be checked with all these kinds of documents, whether you have them and if you are qualified to be in that specific country. We have baggage claim. Baggage claim also is still under the arrival formality. All checked baggages are delivered to the baggage claim area of the airport, where passengers normally reclaim their own baggages. They normally claim their own baggages. The international baggage claim normally are located after the immigration passport and passports control, but prior to customs control. Many baggage claim areas also provide currency exchange. So whenever you are maybe reclaiming your baggages, still at the same section where you are reclaiming your baggages, you can still have to have those facilities where you can exchange your currency to the current currency of the destination you've arrived into. We have customs. Customs, after reclaiming your baggage, the passengers will be required to clear with the customs, which is very important. Now you're in that country, you've reclaimed you've showed all your documents in the immigration and the passport control, you're clean. Then you've gone, reclaimed your baggages, you're clean there. You've also maybe exchanged to certain issues that you wanted, maybe facilitated to you, like the currency. You have them, you're clean. Then you go to the customs, where it's a must that everyone has to go through that channel. After reclaiming their baggage, passengers will be required to clear with the customs. Duty and tax-free allowances are often indicated in those customs hall. Passengers may be offered 3 choices at the customs, and these choices are normally defined as follow. 1 is red, and when you go to that red channel, it's normally written something to declare. Whenever you go to that customs, there's a channel which specifically indicates whether you had something maybe you are to declare or maybe you are to pay for before you go to the other channel or go to the other step at the airport. So red, something to declare. If passengers have goods or currencies to declare, where a duty or tax is also voluntarily paid for the imported goods, e.g. goods purchased in another country, and they've exceeded the personal tax allowance, then you'll be allowed at that channel to pay for them. So because you have something you have to declare. So at the red channel, it's when you have something to declare. Then you go to the green channel. Green channel is when you go to that channel where there's nothing you are to declare. For passengers who bring personal effects and goods that are not intended for commercial purposes and which still do not exceed the duty-free allowance. This includes personal goods that are normally under the team, that is the travel information manual. Then it will mean then that there's nothing you have to declare there, so there will be no even need of you going to the same channel. But you can go there and still say you have nothing to declare because your goods have not exceeded the duty-free allowance and the like. But if they've exceeded, you still have to go still to the red channel, have to pay for it, and then you're declared clean. Then still another choice is on the weight system, whereby we all know that as a passenger you travel with goods or your baggages, and every baggage normally, if you exceed the related weight or the required weight, then it will mean the extra weights of your baggages, you have to pay for them, because each and every weight, there's normally also another extra weight, which is normally a weight allowance which is given. But if you extend on the weight baggage weight, then it will mean the extra weight, you have to pay for them. The weight allowance depends upon the class of travel as follow. But remember, Alana, here, that this weight allowance, they normally vary with the airlines. They vary. To this year you go, you find that maybe the economy class was taking a weight allowance of 20 kg, but you go to another year or another month, it was maybe 30, so it varies. It is not as, you cannot really say it's static, it's somehow dynamic, it keeps changing, varies. So that's it, it keeps changing. And weight allowance depends upon the class of the travel, which maybe we say if you're going with the class, you're traveling in an aircraft, maybe in cabin or section economy, the baggage weight can be 20, and business class 30, first class 40, and the like. But remember, as I said, they keep varying. Now from there, since you've known much of the formalities or which are the requirements, it's also good to understand that still in the same issue of aircraft or maybe air transportation, it's good that you also have an overview of an aircraft, which normally causes different kinds of fares to a passenger. Aircraft are split up into different cabin sections, like first class, business class, premium economy class, and the economy class, with different prices charged for the product and services delivered. For example, you imagine you're going maybe to a music concert and there are different prices of the tickets on offer. You might just want the cheapest, of course, or might pay more to get a better view and more so better services. With this, then it will be up to you as a passenger to choose. Do I want to go in the first class? Do I want to go to the business class? Or do I choose the premium economy or the economy? It's up to you depending on your pocket and how much you can pay. Now it will depend. The same principles applies for air travel. The passenger chooses where to sit depending on how much they want to pay and what services they want offered to them. So with all those considerations, then it will matter, or it will matter now of your choices, whether you want to a business, a first class, or economy, or a premium economy. With those are now the issues about the fare types, depending on which type of the section cabin you have chosen to travel with. Features of each cabin section: first class. First class, as we all know, is normally, first class seating is normally expected to be the most expensive or most costly, since it's known to be the most comfortable. They offer best services, and most customers, especially those who can afford, normally opt for the first class because of the good services and the comfortability of the section. Business class, this class is synonymous with the executive class and is very popular for those who simply do not wish to relinquish to the creature of comforts, yet are not willing to pay top dollars prices either. So they opt to go to the second class because it's not as expensive as the first class. Also, for those who choose this class of economy class, they normally consider the issue of the space. Space factor becomes the deciding factor, space factor. Then we go to the premium economy. Premium economy is normally a step above the economy class. It offers greater distance between the rows and the rows of seats, as well as the roomier seats. And due to the tight quarters of the economy class, premium class now is premium economy class section is now becoming increasingly coveted, creating a huge growth component with virtually all the airlines. So people are now opting more to the premium economy more than the economy class because of its comfortability nature and the spacing it creates between the rows and the roomier seats. As we continue now, the last class, which is the economy class, which I said is the last class and the largest, of course, the largest section of the aircraft on scheduled flights, and normally the only service provided by the charter flights. It has adjustable seats, complimentary meals, and it depends on the length of your flight, It has complimentary drinks as well, drinks which are normally chargeable by the airlines. Airfares and ticketing. Learners, just as I said, I was just taking you through the background, the foundation, just to have a little bit of some knowledge on how these issues of airfares and ticketing are arising. And it's good that the simplest maybe kinds of information you get, then you will not be stuck once you're to start traveling by air. And as we can now see, airfares and ticketing I'll take you through some specific issues about them, or maybe few definitions, so that you understand. Now, after knowing all those requirements and the sections, maybe, so that you don't get confused when you go into, you're told to go board an aircraft, you don't know if you're told of a section or a cabin, you don't know where to start from. It's good that also, since I've taken you through that, then at least you'll have the basis. You have the basic knowledge of how an aircraft looks like. It has section or cabins. Now, on the issues of airfares. Airfare is simply put as the price a passenger pays for in order to travel. Airfare is just the price a passenger pays for in order to travel by air. And ticketing is that process of being offered with an online document, which is a receipt or a ticket, by any airline or a travel agency to confirm that you as an individual have purchased a certain seat on a flight of an aircraft. So that's the ticketing issue. Then airfares are most often based on one-way or a return travel trip. And they must be published, unpublished, or negotiated fares. So these are now the kinds of fares that are normally used mostly whenever you embark on an air transportation. It can either be a published one, unpublished, or a negotiated. But remember, the most commonly used is the published, because that is the one anybody can afford to pay for. Unpublished fares are also known as consolidated fares and are offered by consolidators or the bucket shops. Published, I've said, are those fares that are available for purchase by anyone who wishes to travel by air. So I'll take you through those specific types of the published fares, published airfares. And the following are the types of the published airfares, which are based on the round or a round, we normally say round or a return trip, because you either go and come back, or go and it becomes like a one-way. You don't come back. So that is a one-way travel. You move from point A to point B. That's one way. But if you're moving from point A to point B and from point B back to point A, that's like a round trip or a return trip. So we go to the types of the published fares. Apex are discounted international fares, which normally require tickets to be purchased in advance, such as you purchase it maybe in advance, like 7 days, 14 days, and 21. So it has like you pay in advance, like 7 days in advance, 14 days, and 21 day minimum advance purchase, and will have other restrictions, like for example non-refundable. It's non-refundable, and change of fee are just a few of the possible restriction. Then we go to excursion fares under the published airfares, are lower priced fares that involve restrictions like advance purchase. You have to do an advance purchase. Time of year, which year are you to travel? Those are now the specific kinds of restrictions that are normally imposed upon the excursion type of a fare. If you are maybe choosing to travel using the excursion fare, then you must know what is supposed to be, or as a passenger, you're supposed to know under the issues of the excursion fares, that one for one, you have to do an advance purchase. The second one, which year of the travel, you have to be very specific. And then the minimum and the maximum stay in that destination you're traveling to. Then we have joint fares. Joint fares are offered by airlines that have sort of partnership relationship on the selected air routes. So if you're to travel maybe to a certain destination, know what type of airfare to choose, because maybe you may be restricted at some point if you had chosen a fare maybe which maybe could be of joint, whereby they have their own regulations they are following since they are in a joint partnership. So with that, you must be very careful as you're choosing the type of the airfares maybe to purchase or buy before you travel. A through fare are those fares to a destination reached by traveling through a gateway city. a gateway city. For example, you want to travel, you're coming from Kenya, you want to go to Zanzibar, you want to go to Namibia. And maybe in that specific through fare as it is, it's supposed to be that you are to travel to another country whereby you're not supposed to show the kind of fare. Then as you are reaching to that fare, that country, the specific fare will not be shown because it's a direct one. It will show that you're going through maybe Egypt as you're going through Namibia. So Egypt now becomes like a gateway city, which normally does not specify how much you had paid once you are in Egypt, but it will show a through fare up to Namibia. So that's just an example to show how a through fare is normally gotten. Unrestricted, flexible, or full fare. These are fare titles given to the most expensive tickets and are the fares that allows one to get a refund or change of ticket when necessary. These fares can also be purchased at any time, even the same day of travel. So you can see it is a bit better than the ones we've just read there before, because this at least it has no much of the restriction imposed on them. So that's unrestricted, flexible, the full fares. We have bereavement fares. These are fares which are always the lowest fares and can be the last minute fares that can be booked until the departure time. So still this one looks more of this, but still we find that this is more, they are offered maybe to family members and those traveling to a funeral. So maybe the charges could also be different with these because of the specific services it is to be offering. So that's a bereavement fares, which is very different also with the unrestricted. Unrestricted tends to be a bit better because it's so open that anyone can feel comfortable purchasing this kind of a fare. We have anatomy of a journey next. We have anatomy of a journey. Remember, Lana, here I'm telling you that in airfares and ticketing introductory part, I just want you to understand the basics, how to go about the issue of air transportation. Anatomy of a journey. And this anatomy of a journey, actually, it consists of the entire routine included on a ticket or a group of conjunction tickets, whereby in a ticket you'll be shown where you're going to, where you're coming from, it shows all the details, which is the intermediate points, which are the via points, that is. And now this now gives you an entire anatomy of that journey you're involving yourself into. So that's now the anatomy of a journey. It consists of the entire routine, whereby it will show you which are the via points, which is the intermediate points, which are the origin point and the final destination. Then it gives you a full anatomy of that specific journey you're involving yourself into. A journey consists of the following ticketed point. And remember, as I'm giving you this is all about the anatomy of a journey, because in a journey, it has to involve ticketed points. Air transportation, there has to be ticketed points. And this is now what I'll take you through so that you get to understand better. Origin. Origin is the very first ticketed point. We all understand that as you embark onto a journey, there is a point you have to move from initially as you move on with the entire journey. So origin, this is the initial point or the starting point and the first ticketed point in the routine. It is also the fare construction point and is usually in the country of commencement of a travel. It is normally in the country of the commencement of a travel. If you're moving from Kenya, you're going to London. So Kenya becomes your origin, where you're commencing your journey from. So that is the COC, the country of commencement of your travel. So that is the origin. It is the very first ticketed point. We have intermediate points next. This is the ticketed via points. Intermediate points, these are ticketed via points in between consecutive fare construction points. And when you talk about the consecutive fare construction points, it means it is between the fare construction origin, it is in between the fare construction point origin and the fare construction point destination. Then it is at the middle, that is the intermediate via point. So if you understand point A, point B, then in the middle we have the intermediate points. Now it comes in between, and that's why they're called via points. So ticketed via points, in between consecutive fare constructions points, that is origin, destination, and this is also referred to as transfer points, which are further classified as, number one, intermediate stopover. When you talk about the intermediate stopover, remember I'm still in the intermediate points. We have the very first category of it, intermediate stopover. And in the intermediate stopover, this implies that point where the passenger breaks his journey and is not scheduled to depart within, it's scheduled to depart within the 24 hours of arrival. So that's a stopover. It's not scheduled. So you arrive at that point, that is an intermediate. You start your journey from origin A, you've arrived at your intermediate point. You are not scheduled to depart. You stay there maybe and you continue your journey later on. So that's a stopover. It's a stopover. You're not allowed to move any further. The next day maybe you can continue your journey. That's a stopover. Then we go to intermediate no stopover. When you talk about an intermediate stopover, this is normally a point where the passenger arrives and departs within the 24 hours. It is also known as a transfer connection or a connection point. So when you talk about the intermediate no stopover, this is whereby there is no stopover. It means that you've arrived at that point, which is an intermediate point. You are from a point A, origin. You're moving on through to the point B, which is your final destination, but there's a point where you've arrived into, which is an intermediate point. Then when you say no stopover, it means that you have still to depart within the 24 hours, either to transfer to another flight or get connected to another flight. That's what we call a stopover, an intermediate no stopover. Then there's something here I want you learner to understand or to note. Transfer points are not the same as transit points. Unlike transfer points, transit points do not always involve a change of plane. So get that very clear. There is fare component. There is also another thing under the anatomy of a journey which you need to understand. There is the issue of the fare component. And fare component normally is a portion of the itinerary between two consecutive fare construction points. And remember what I've said about a fare construction point. It is whereby there is the point A and point B, and each and every point there is a fare construction point. So that's a portion, and normally we say that's a fare component. You're coming from point A, there's a fare construction point A, that is origin, and there's a fare construction point B, which is your final destination. So in all those, then we say you're moving from point A, you're going to point B, origin, destination. Then there has to be what you call a fare component, where there are fare construction destination. This is the ultimate stopping place of the journey, and as a terminal point in the routine, it is also considered as the fare construction point or a fare break point, where the fare is actually coming to an end. Fare break point, destination. So learner, get that very clear. Then I'll take you through the types of journeys so that you know if you're moving from Kenya, for example, you want to go to London. Are you going to London coming back, or are you going to London and it's your final stop? Maybe you don't involve in so much travel. Maybe it's a one-way or a round trip, or I'll take you now through those types of journey, which maybe you find yourself involved with in some times in life. So one-way trip. One-way trip is normally a very simple one-way journey using one-way fares, whereby you just move from point A, you're going to point B. So you just use one fare component because there will be no moving back to point A. So there's one fare component. And remember what I've just said about the fare component. So that is a simple one-way journey using one-way fares and possessing the following features. This is the features one-way trip has. One, the origin and the final destinations are normally in different countries, because remember I've said you're moving from Kenya going to London. It can never be the same. Kenya can never be London, you know, it has to be different countries. So This journey consists also of one fare component. Remember, I've said moving from one point to another point, there's one fare component involved. And remember, if it's an open round trip or a return trip, it will involve two fare components, because there will be also another fare construction starting from the destination back to the origin. So one fare component is in this one-way trip. We go to round trip or a return trip is a travel entirely by air from a point to another point and return to the original point. So I said on this round, it's where you're moving from point A, you're coming from Kenya, going to London, and still as you arrive to London, you will be coming back to Kenya. So that's a round trip or a return trip. It's entirely a travel from a point to another point and return still to the original point. It has two fare components and equal normal fares. It is a round trip or in a round trip or a return trip, the origin and the destinations are in the same country. Remember, I said it's a return, so you come back to the origin where you'd come from. So the return and the origin and the destination now tend to be in the same country because it's a round or a return trip. Circle trip. It involves travel from a point and return thereto by a continuous circuitous motion or a continuous circuitous route. The journey comprises two fare components. So it's like you're moving, let me give an example of here in Kenya. You're coming from JKIA, you're going to Kisumu, and then still you go to another airport, maybe in Eldoret, and then that's a more of a continuous circuitous air, and it has maybe two fare components. So that's a circle trip. It involves different airports whereby you move it's like a circuitous motion or air route. An open jaw flight as another type of a journey is one that in the simplest term implies flying from a point or point A to point B and then from point C back to point B. Remember here now, learner, you are moving from point A, you're going to point B. But you want to go back to point A using another different airport. You will not use the necessary one, the B. You will use another one which is maybe point C, a different airport, but maybe was a neighboring airport to the final destination you had arrived to. So use another different airport to reach into the point A. So you're moving from point A, you're going to point B, but you will not use the point B coming back to point B. You'll use another different one, which is a point C somewhere, and then go back to your point A. So in its simpler form, then it's flying from point A to point B, then from point C back to point B. Points B and C are often neighboring airports, or at least in the same general area. So you don't have necessarily to use the same airport you had used to reach to your final destination. Use a different one, and so that you go back to your origin point. Now, learner, since you've learned so much on the issues of how airfares is, then it is good that you also understand. We have to know so that when you'll be traveling, you know how many stopovers was I involved with, or how many transfers was I. And as a passenger, you should be able to do those simple counting for yourselves so that you know how many stopovers have been involved with, and you just don't have to see them on your receipt, so that you get maybe the knowledge, or maybe to knowing how many transfers and stopovers you are involved with. It's good that also as a passenger, you know how to count it for yourself because of the different routines that you'll be involved with. So guidelines on how to count stopovers and transfers. Guidelines on how to count stopovers and transfers. For a fare component, count all intermediate points for a fare component. You see, what I said about the fare component is whereby we have the, 2 consecutive fare construction points. And these 2 consecutive fare construction points are fare construction point A, the origin, and the fare construction point B, the destination. So if you understand that, you're knowing where you're coming from and where you're going to, then you'll be able to know which are the intermediate points you are involved with, and you from there you'll be able to now start knowing how to count, whether it's a stopover or a transfer. So for a fare component, count all intermediate points with a stop of more than 24 hours as a stopover. Then with that, you will know that was the first stopover I've encountered, or my journey has encountered. Then with that, you will now start knowing how these issues of air transportation is normally done. So learner, just know a fare component, just understand where you're coming from, the origin and the destination. Then as you're moving on, count all the intermediate points with a stop, of course, of more than 24 hours as a stopover. Then with that, you will now be starting to count and to knowing how to count whether it was a stopover or a transfer. So with this, you've now started knowing how to count a stopover. Of course, there you will know that's the first stopover I've encountered in my journey. Then there is to count the number of transfers in a fare component. To count the number of transfers in a fare component, include all intermediate points as transfer points. So when you be counting transfers in your journey, and if you want to know how to do it and to be accurate, then you must do this. Count the number of transfers in a fare component. I've said if it's a fare component, or maybe one fare component, it's a return one way. Origin A, point B, or the origin and the destination. Of course, with that, you'll now be able to count all intermediate points as transfer points, because every fare component in a journey, it has to have an intermediate via point. So with that, it will be very helpful for you, and you'll be able to count very easily a transfer, because you now know in this we had a stopover, or maybe a transfer point at maybe Cairo. You were going to Egypt, you were going to Namibia. You maybe stopped at that and you knew that was either where you connected or you are transferred. Then with that, it becomes very easy for you to know I encountered a transfer in my journey, and you'll be able to count. Then you went further and you were able to identify a stopover, because you went at a place and you were able to spot a place where you stopped for more than 24 hours. Then with that, you'll be able to know we had a stopover, maybe 1 or 2 stopover. Then with that, it becomes very easy for you to know how to count stopovers and transfers. And remember, a stopover cannot be a transfer point. So this includes all stopovers and connections points. So as you're doing this, you'll also be knowing how to do it, and counting, because you know I was involved with a transfer point where I was connected, I was connected to another flight or plane. Then you know that's one of the transfers you are involved with in your journey. A stopover, I've said, if it goes, if you go to a place and you stop for more than 24 hours, then you know a stopover was there. So, learner, it's good that you understand how to do these simple countings of the stopovers and transfers, so that you know how your journey is really going on. And with that, you will have a full knowledge of the anatomy of a journey and how a journey should be. So to go on with the issue of the guidelines on how to count the stopovers and the transfers, still you have to know, do not include the fare construction points. This is very important, learner. Please note this. As you're doing this counting of transfers and stopovers, be very careful that you do not count fare construction points. And fare construction points, remember, I've said it is fare construction origin, fare construction destination, where you're going to. So don't count them. Don't count them, and because they are not part and parcel on how to do a transfer count or a stopover count. The other thing is that where there's a surface break where there's a surface break. The last point of arrival by air and the first point of departure count together as one transfer. I hope there's something you've noted there. Where there's a surface break, the last point of arrival, you've arrived, the last point of arrival, so that's the destination. And the first point of departure, of course, that is the origin, count together as one transfer. So we find that we have three issues to notice there. We have a surface break, and we have the we have the point of departure, and also we have the arrival point. We are being told you take them together and count them as one transfer. What I meant by surface break, a surface break is whereby you maybe land in a certain airport, and maybe it was maybe for refueling issues, you know, all those kinds of a thing. There were some services that were to be done maybe on an aircraft and the like. So there was what we call a surface break. There was that kind of whereby there was like not a connection really, not a transfer, but more so there were some services that were to be done, and it encountered, or you in your entire journey you encountered what you call a surface break. So there was like a break somehow. So you are told with all that together with the points of construction of fares, which is the point of arrival and the point of departure, count them together as transfer. With that, then you'll now be able to know how all these issues of stopovers, transfers are normally done to come up with a precise number of those specific transfers and stopovers you've got or you've encountered in your entire journey or routine. So Lana, with all those then, those information, you'll be best placed to knowing what is to be done or what you should do whenever you are in an airport or whenever you are traveling by air. You'll know, I'm traveling to Namibia, I'm going to Botswana, I'm going to London. Then what kind of a journey am I involving myself into? Then you'll know, should I go for the one way, or is mine a round trip or a circle trip? You know, it will really depend. But if you have this basic knowledge, then you'll be well placed to knowing where or how airfares are normally calculated. But that one will be done in our next lesson. So for today's lesson, I really think with those few issues I've brought forth in this lesson will help you to understand a bit on how airfares and ticketing are done during air transportation. So Lana, I come to the end of that session and that lecture. I now tend to end there, but in case you have questions, problems or maybe challenges to understanding airfares and ticketing, I'll be there to answer your queries and to help you understand more. So let's continue interacting more on the e-learning and we learn together. Thank you so much, Lana. Thank you for your time of listening. See you, bye-bye, and take care.
These televised lectures supplement our robust online learning going on our MKU online platform. You can view more on our televised lectures via our online platform. We are in a digital era, and Mount Kenya University knows this. The following are the steps to follow so as to complete your online application. Download the application form from the website www.mku.ac.ke. Attach copies of your academic certificates and ID. Pay the application fees via M-Pesa pay bill number 270988. Your ID is the account number. 2,000 shillings is the charge for a postgraduate. You can also deposit in the bank accounts provided on the website. Then email all the above to apply@mku.ac.ke.